What is happening in the Middle East is calamitous. It is a most dangerous development.
Knowing that bombs and missiles and things are going off around us, and you never know where they can hit next. I've never been in a situation ever in my life, and to be honest, I'm very scared. I'm nervous.
None of us, we have no information from our loved ones. As I said, the communication system is completely shut down.
It will impact on world trade, absolutely. Oil and gas exploration and shipments will increase.
Take advantage of any available opportunity to get out and come home.
The conflict in the Middle East, it's very much in sharp focus. It's topical, and it starts right now. A very good evening to you, South Africa, and those watching around the world. My name is Blaine Herman, and this is It's Topical. Our panel of guests are here, as well as South Africans caught up in the Middle East when the conflict broke out. You will see them in a short while. We look forward to their comments and their take on this conflict. Peace in the Middle East. It's a catchy phrase, right? Elusive in reality for now. And the situation there makes us think about our own mortality. How can the global community constructively advance the peace agenda? Thousands of South Africans, citizens, registered their presence across the Middle East. And we saw this weekend some arriving back home from Dubai as the conflict in the region continues to disrupt travel. So I want to take a look at this conflict from a South African perspective. President Cyril Ramaphosa calling on the international community, including multilateral institutions and as well as regional partners, right, to redouble efforts aimed at promoting mediation and peaceful resolution. In a statement, the presidency also mentioned Article 51 of the United Nations Charter, saying that it provides for self-defense only when a state has been subjected to an armed invasion. And it goes on to say that anticipatory self-defense is not permitted under international law, and self-defense cannot be based on assumption or anticipation. So how does that frame the current conflict between the United States, Israel, and Iran? What does it say about the principles that are seen as fundamental to the international rules-based order? South Africa's International Relations Department putting out a statement recently saying that while Iran has the right to defend itself against those states that engaged in armed attacks against it, the actions against the Gulf Cooperation Council states are not in line with what is permitted under Article 51 of the UN Charter, and it violates the sovereignty of the affected states. Iran now says it will suspend strikes on its neighbors unless attacks come from them. However, we've seen just today reporting from at least one international news agency on Qatar, in particular, apparently intercepting a ballistic missile attack. How and when does this conflict end? It brings us to the question of the week, and we're asking you, as the Middle East conflict enters its second week, what concerns you most? And is there room for South Africa to play a diplomatic role? Let us know at SABC News_TV. Hostilities in the Middle East. What does it mean for the rest of the world? What does it mean for you and your family here in South Africa? This is what I want to break down tonight. Perspective with the better minds coming up. All right, before we get started with our discussion, let me bring in Clayson Monyela, Chief of State Protocol at the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. Clayson, good to have you on the program. I know your time is limited, so let's get into the news aspect of the discussion. This is, and I guess you would agree, right, by far not a faraway geopolitical saga that you can ignore. Firstly, are all known South Africans accounted for at this stage?
Thank you very much, Blaine, and it's good to be on your platform. So the first thing I'll say is the number of South Africans in the Gulf states that we know of are accounted for. And what I mean by that is we've not been notified of anyone that has been a victim of these attacks, which is a good thing. We've encouraged South Africans in all of these countries to register with us. We've got a Airport Travel Smart app that is available on all the app stores, and we've seen thousands of South Africans registering. The last time we checked yesterday, we were sitting at over 9,000 that had registered with us. And the reason why we do that is because the app also has alerts specific to every country to inform them of the latest developments, but also because we're trying to get those that want to come back to South Africa to travel,
Right.
we're also able to update flight availability. You've seen that there's been partial reopening of the airspaces in some of these countries. Emirates, Etihad, and others have started flying again to Cape Town and Johannesburg, and this is why some of the South Africans who are stuck in these countries have started arriving home. So we keep updating this, encouraging South Africans to take advantage of any available opportunity to get out of the countries that they want to get out of and come home.
Right. I just want to explore that update on those that are leaving for now. You said that there's about 9,000 that has been registered. That's up from over 6,000 earlier on in the week, correct? The Gulf Air Corridor, it's vital, understatement, right? But this conflict has triggered one of the most severe aviation disruptions. Give us that update in terms of how the evacuation process is proceeding. How many South Africans have asked for assistance to come back? How many are already back?
So the government of South Africa has not activated an evacuation plan necessarily. We do have a plan. In fact, all embassies, not just of South Africa, of other countries as well, all have evacuation plans. We haven't activated that. There is a plan that's on the table. In fact, we're coordinating with other countries in the SADC region like Namibia and Zimbabwe. But as we were working on this, then the partial reopening of the airspace happened and flights started flying in and out of some of these countries, including the UAE. And then most of our people started, taking advantage of those. It remains on standby for activation. Of course, the biggest challenge has been this thing that, the airspace gets reopened and then more attacks happen and gets shut down. So it's a moving target, which makes planning a little bit complex. What we can do, and this is what we've been doing, we've been advising South Africans, as and when the opportunity avails itself, please take advantage of this, because most of them are actually living and working in these countries. So it's not people who are there on holiday or who are just there for business. So they don't necessarily want to come back, and they're not necessarily stuck or stranded. Of course, there is a limited or a small number of people who find themselves stranded and stuck there because they were in transit to other places or were just there on holiday or on business. So the bulk of the people that we're talking about are people who actually live and work there. So it's something that we monitor and assess as we go along. And we've been making this point, Blaine, that the longer this conflict goes on for, the more difficult it will be to get people out of these countries, which is why we make the call that as and when the opportunity avails itself, take advantage of it and come home.
Right. It is no doubt a fluid situation. If people want to leave now, at this point, where are the safe exit routes for South Africans in the Gulf states?
So at Etihad is flying out of Abu Dhabi to various destinations, including 2 countries on the African continent. Emirates is flying to several destinations, including Cape Town and Johannesburg. And in fact, this they do in conjunction with SAA. So we actually are able to know how many flights they are making available. They've been making the point that if this current situation of attacks in the UAE in particular continues, they should be able to get back to 100% operations, which means more flights, more regularly, in a predictable manner, which allows people to then plan to come home. So those are the 2 corridors. Oman is another option, and Jordan, but I think for practicality reasons, the 2 that I've mentioned are the ones that are more practical. We have a group in Kuwait City that will be moving via Riyadh in Saudi Arabia tomorrow. About 100 of them, they will be coming home. Our missions both in Kuwait City and in Saudi Arabia are coordinating their return back to South Africa. So all our missions, it's all hands on deck. We're working on this because this is a caring government that wants to make sure that we leave no one behind. We want to see all South Africans safe and accounted for and back home.
You know, the logistics of people wanting to leave is one thing. I wonder how much of a conundrum is the diplomatic efforts that is linked to this conflict. How much of a test, Clayson, is this conflict for Pretoria's diplomatic agility? I ask this in the context of, say, for instance, our BRICS Plus alliances and South Africa's non-aligned approach in terms of its foreign policy. How much of a test is it?
Well, if you look at the statement that we issued yesterday, you will see that South Africa is one of the few countries that are able to stick to principle. We firmly believe in the resolution of all conflicts or political challenges through peaceful means, which means dialogue. We have been able to articulate that principle, and I think we are one of the few countries that even condemned Iran for their response in attacking the Gulf states, quoting Article 51 of the UN Charter. So we believe that we are on the right side of history and we stick to principle. We have a moral authority that anybody can't challenge. We have a proven track record of resolving many conflicts, not just in our region, the African continent, but also in other regions where we are called upon to play a role to mediate peace efforts. We remain available, as you heard the president say.
Yeah.
And this is the message I will continue making, that can diplomacy and peace be given a chance? Conflicts of this nature are best resolved through peaceful means, and that means dialogue.
Before I let you go, Clayson, the president was in the United States for the funeral service of Jesse Jackson, headed to Brazil on a state visit. I wonder, in terms of these diplomatic channels that are open, in terms of Washington, in terms of Tel Aviv, in terms of Iran, is that still wide open at this stage?
Sorry, just say that again. I'm sorry.
In terms of the diplomatic channels and the conversations that the president is having with Washington and Tel Aviv, also Tehran, is that still wide open?
We believe that that door should never be shut. Diplomacy must always be given a chance. That's how you achieve a durable, peaceful solution to any conflict.
All right. Thank you so much indeed for your time. Clayson Monyela is the Chief of State Protocol at the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. Appreciate that update. Let's get the discussion on the road. Let me introduce my guest, Professor Patrick Bond, political economist at the University of Johannesburg, as well as Sophie Mokoena, who's a veteran journalist with the International Beat. As you know, SABC News international correspondent. Thank you very much indeed. And we also have some South Africans as well working in Dubai, living in Dubai. Some are back already. We have Spitch, who is back home, I understand. Also, Yatin Soni in Bahrain. Bugala, who works in Abu Dhabi, and Yusuf Umar in Dubai. We'll get to you guys. Let me start with you, in fact, because just to pick up from what Clayson had to say, Yusuf, let me go to you. talk to us about, no doubt it's a fluid situation. There's heightened tensions around the world, in particular the Gulf states. What are you seeing? What are you witnessing?
Yeah, just point of correction. I'm in Doha, Qatar,
In Doha.
not
All right.
Dubai. It's been incredibly tense. We're now, over a week into this. The first few days were quite a rapid escalation of violence we saw and heard.
Yusuf, I think we've just lost you. Is it me, Control? Let's just check is your mic still on?
Can you guys have got me?
Yeah, got you now.
I said it's been a week long, over a week now. It escalated incredibly fast. We saw rockets in the sky for most of the first few days. We heard those rockets being detonated by these Patriot missiles and other forms of defense. We've basically been told to stay indoors for the most part. Feels much like COVID. Don't leave unless you absolutely have to. At times, some of the explosions were close enough that you could really feel the windows shaking. You could see the smoke overhead. Having said that, I think for the most part, they've been really, really good and really coordinated about it. We get incredible messaging. You basically get like SMS messages to tell you, hey, there's rockets coming in, get away from the windows, get somewhere safe, and we'll let you know when it's safe to come out. And then you get a subsequent message to let them know that that they've dealt with the issue. And so far here in Qatar specifically, we haven't seen any fatalities. Obviously, they've seen fatalities in Dubai, they've seen fatalities in Saudi Arabia and other parts of the region, but here we haven't seen any fatalities just yet.
Right. Yatin, let me bring you in. Where are you exactly? And do you share similar stories? I mean, South Africans are telling us about days and nights of, being peppered by missile alerts. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? Yatin, do we have you? There we go.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Yeah, no, thanks, Blaine. As Yusuf is describing, it's, look, we're right at the forefront. This is the eastern front line that I'm literally on. Yesterday, I took the decision to move from where I was, which was under 5 kilometers from the US naval base. There was just a lot of debris and explosions. And I think the last straw was just a couple of houses from the guest house I'm staying at. A missile debris hit the roof there. And my good friends that are living here for 10 years moved me in with them now, 10 kilometers further west, so going towards the Saudi side, where it's a little bit less chaotic. But still, I mean, we've had some drones and missiles make landfall just last night, and it continues to be intercepted in the air. And I'm in a situation in Bahrain here where I'm feeling a little bit forgotten. I got to say, and it's a pity that Mr. Monyela left, because this little island, now the airport's closed, the seaport is closed. My travel agent is telling me as of all day today that the system has crashed and I can't get an e-visa for Saudi. So I'm literally trapped here. The safest place, no doubt, is to stay on land. But I hear Mr. Monyela saying get out, and Pretoria saying if there's a means, get out. I'm seeing French in the guest house I'm staying at, French citizens being fetched and taken to Saudi and flown out via Riyadh to France. But I'm not feeling that.
Spitch, I see you're very eager. Where are you exactly? What are you hearing?
I'm actually.
Spitch, we're losing you. Just repeat that last part.
Can you hear me right now?
Got you.
I've been banning that you let go of Clayson. He must not create a perfect image of what they're doing as a South African government. From a diplomacy point of view, I understand that he needs to paint that image. We've got South Africans who are stuck in our country, and our country does not have a diplomacy strategy or framework of how they're going to evacuate South Africans who are stuck in Dubai. We've got thousands of South Africans who are stuck in Dubai, and he must not come here and tell us about policy. What has our government done? I personally had to book a commercial flight myself. Our government does not have evacuation plan. We've seen other countries, and it's saying there's no other country. We have seen the many other countries, the Spanish, Americans, when we got to the airport, I could afford to book a flight back to South Africa. Our government has not been able to cater for that. And he, as a head of diplomacy at DECO, he should come to us and tell us, how are we going to rescue those South Africans who are there? We're not going to come here and play PR. Those are people's lives back there.
All right.
In Dubai. And he's telling us, no, I'm not done. He is telling us that no, it's they can go through Oman. Oman, the driving route to drive from Dubai to Oman is about 5 hours.
Right.
How about South Africans who are going there to work, who don't have the means to drive there? What is our government doing about that?
Right. Your concerns are no doubt noted. We will try and get Clayson back on. He had some time constraints.
Bring Clayson back.
Guys.
Bring Clayson back.
I empathize with you all, but be real. Like, America themselves have told their own citizens to figure your own. They're saying you guys take commercial flights.
Not.
Hold on, Yusuf. Just watch the language, Yusuf. Just watch the language. We do apologize, folks. But just watch the language.
But the point is, you're saying, hey, I can't do a 5-hour drive. This is way too far. The most sophisticated countries on earth with the biggest budgets from Europe to North America are saying, we got into this war so quickly, we didn't think about evacuation plans. They can't even look after their own citizens. And you're expecting so much of the South African administration.
You can catch your breath.
Yusuf and Spitch, let's pause it there. We'll come back to you in a short while. Let me get some comments from our guests. Sophie, let me just bring you in.
Nonsense.
Just hang on, Spitch. We do apologize, folks, for the language used. Sophie, you've heard some of the frustrations from those who are experiencing this firsthand. You heard what Clayson had to say. What do you make of South Africa's messaging? What do you make of South Africa's strategy in terms of this conflict?
Clearly, messaging has been there, but I don't think it's enough for those people who are frustrated, who are affected, who are in those countries, because it's like being in a danger zone, and therefore you must accept and understand how they respond, because they are caught in a very difficult situation. And of course, the emotions will be high. And the truth of the matter is clearly there hasn't been an evacuation of the South African citizens. And therefore, those who are stranded, who are affected, will feel hurt when government is not doing something. On the other hand, you had Yusuf talking about even America itself. Last week, until Friday, American citizens were very angry that the administration decided to launch attacks and join this war. On the other hand, they are not doing anything to help their citizens to leave that region that is now engulfed in a terrible war. And therefore, there are shortcomings, truth be told, from different countries. And if you speak to any citizen of any country who's trapped in a war zone, you want to leave as soon as possible. And therefore, it must be a situation where the government is doing something, but the reality is there are also challenges. When the airspace is closed, then you can't fly in. And when the airspace is opened, at times there's not enough time. A flight from here to Dubai, it takes how many hours? Almost 10 hours. When they decide now to say the airspace is available, that plane must leave Johannesburg to either Dubai or Doha. There's no time unless you partner with other countries who are around there. The airlines such as the Emirates, your Qatar Airways, your other, like even the Ethiopian airline, if there are planes that are in those regions, because Ethiopian airline does fly to all those countries in the Gulf region, and they constantly have a plane perhaps that is supposed to come out of a particular country. You can arrange that your citizens can fly when the airspace is available, but it's understandable. I mean, it's to be trapped in a war zone is traumatic.
Prof. Bond, how do you see it? Obviously, the frustrations are apparent. It's a kinetic environment, these Gulf states, and there's a fear of the unknown as well. Could South Africa handle this better, or is it is what it is?
Well, on the logistics, first, thanks for having me. Thanks for the guys. Our compatriots are nervous, impatient. I think the crucial thing, will this be another 1 week of their suffering? And Iranians, 1,200 dead already. Will they be suffering 1, maybe 3 weeks? Trump put it at the sort of 5-week level. Or would it go on? Well, what's the worst case? It would be Israel using one of its nuclear weapons on Tehran. And it's in the scenarios. They started with nukes in 1961. They helped the apartheid regime get nukes in the late 70s. They haven't used it, but we have a very terrible situation in which even the US ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, is encouraging the so-called Greater Israel Project. In other words, just take as much as you can. He said they could take it all, which is from the Euphrates to the Nile. That's a big chunk of Saudi Arabia and Iraq and, of course, Jordan and Syria and part of Egypt. Now, that's the crucial, awful worst case. And I hope you guys are safe, because luckily what I do see is that the Iranian ruling party has got some splits. They may have originally been the source of some of the bombing. Tucker Carlson, the right-wing radio and TV personality, says he thinks there may even be Mossad agents doing the so-called false flag. We haven't seen the proof of that. But whatever is making your lives miserable, guys, I hope you are going to be safe. But really what we can say, I think, is that the Dubai brand, the Doha brand, right, the Abu Dhabi brand, the airplanes, the biggest airport in the world in Dubai, that's not going to be an easy ride anymore. And if you can get out, you probably should. And we should be rethinking, as South Africa, the way in which we relate to these petro-tyrannies, because the kind of fighting we've seen, just think the way our dear friends Yusuf and Snitch are divided and conquered, that's what's happening for the whole world, because there's a board of peace that Trump set up last month, which includes 3 BRICS as solid members, Egypt, Indonesia, and UAE. And then you've got, of course, Iran, a BRICS member, under threat. And so we're in a chaotic situation where the divide and conquer that Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu have achieved really is shocking. And it could go much worse.
And you know what? I spoke to an official at the Iranian embassy in South Africa. The Iranians are ready to fight for 6 months. Trump is talking about 3 months, 3 weeks, 6 weeks. Iranians are saying 6 months. And therefore, it will be important for the South African government and other countries to ensure that they find a way to assist their citizens, because we are in for a very long haul. That's what the Iranians told me.
Donald Trump is calling for unconditional surrender. Iranians are saying no such thing. We'll see how this plays out. Let me just go back to the video wall. Philip, where are you and what are you experiencing?
I'm currently in Abu Dhabi, in Yas Island, but now I'm currently on duty. I'm at work right now. So with my experience, it's terrible this side. It's very hard because...
Philip, did we lose you?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, got you.
All right. I'm saying for this past week, I lost a family member, but unfortunately I couldn't be home because the airports were closed and all of that. And another thing, the banking apps were not working, so it was just hard to get by. And sometimes with all these attacks, we're not allowed to go outside the buildings with whatever that's going on. So as for now, comparing the attacks for the past few days, yesterday and today, it's a little bit better compared, because we can get like only 1 alert a day, compared to the previous days.
Yusuf, is that contributing to the psychological strain that people are going through with the unknown at that level?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, Philip, I'm so sorry to hear about your loss and that you couldn't attend that funeral. You're often considering your exit strategies. What are the various routes that you have out? I think one of the challenges that many of us on this call have faced is that your exit strategies are so limited. You have airspaces that are closed, and when they're open, they're for very specific and short amounts of time. You have certain routes that you can potentially take driving into Saudi Arabia, or Oman, but these are long distances. And so there's been some reports that suggest, well, are you much safer being on the road for that long as much as you are staying at home and just trying to stay sheltered? So I think, to your point, it's that unknown and that anxiety of not having choices that make people feel anxious. Having said that, I mean, statistically, everybody who's on this line who are in the Middle East right now are arguably safer in their daily lives than they would be maybe in South Africa with just general crime and car accidents and the like. There has been a very small amount of fatalities that have happened across Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, the UAE, Saudi Arabia. Very, very small. Obviously, it's tragic and it's been absolutely awful to witness those that have been hurt, but it's been a tiny, tiny amount. So while we are here and while it does feel unsafe, and it's scary hearing sounds outside, I mean, I've got a wife and 2 kids nearby. The reality is, statistically, you're not in the most unsafe area.
Yeah. I wanted to bring, did we lose control? Did we lose Spitch? Okay, we seem to have lost Spitch. We'll come back to him in a short while. We need to take a quick break, folks. Reset. We're going to come back and talk about how this is going to affect you at home, your pockets. What are the consequences, the economic consequences of this? This is no longer a distant geopolitical drama playing out. There's real consequences, real impact here in South Africa. We'll discuss that next. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching It's Topical. So much to discuss, so little time, but let's try to get through it. We ask you in terms of the question of the week, as the Middle East conflict enters its second week, what concerns you the most? And is there room for South Africa to play a diplomatic role, a bigger diplomatic role? Let us know at SABC News_TV. You have. Let's put up some of your comments. Take a look at what you have to say in this regard. And Jabulo is saying, I'm not concerned. The people who want to play a role should go there and never come back. Lawrence is saying, stay out of other people's affairs. South African government must just focus on local affairs, period. Tell Ramaphosa to say no comment when he gets asked anything about the war. This is no play, it's dangerous. Zora says, and I'm concerned about the petrol price. We're going to talk about a bit about that. And Hester, in response to Zora, saying, me too. It can mean that we go back to 1976 when petrol stations were closed over weekends and you needed to get a permit if you needed petrol after hours. Charmaine says, I think South Africa should seriously spend time and effort on domestic problems and refrain from involving itself with foreign problems. And Bogani says, my only concern are the fuel prices that will end up skyrocketing. We have no business poking our nose in that conflict. All right, we do appreciate your comments at SABC News_TV. Let's bring in Professor Bond in terms of some of the comments you heard, the concerns, mainly how this is going to affect me in my pocket, the petrol price, etc. Should South Africa be bracing for economic shockwaves?
Yes, absolutely. The petrol price is already taking a hit, and it's regulated. Every month we change the petrol price and try to catch up. So it's now about 7 rand per litre below what is required. And we're currently paying about 20 in the inland area, about 19 on the coast. And I would guess that's going to go up by 30-40%. We can't tell for now, but we'll basically see the price per barrel from that $60 that it's been fairly steady at for the last year or so. There was a huge spike because of Russia invading Ukraine. Yeah. Then it's been down. The coal price has been way down from 400 peak now to about 100. But those will go up, especially because the Strait of Hormuz, where Iran has the lock on all of that oil, but also gas. And gas, especially the gas from Qatar going to Europe, has gone up. So let's say that the next big problem, once you get a big inflation increase from this imported shock inflation, nothing to do with our own workers demanding too high, whatever the internal demands might be. But once you get that, then the interest rate probably kicks up. And that's because we go from probably the 3.3% range now that we're in, which is sort of safe. It's in that in that band. But now the band has changed because Lesego Kganyago, the central bank governor, has said, no, we're going to try to target lower. And now we go to above 4.5 or so, and then 1% up, 2%. So we're probably at the bottom of that interest rate cycle. And that's been why there's been a little bit more economic activity, because it's been a bit lower. And now that's gone. Petrol prices, interest rates, and then of course the knock-on effect to everything else we do. We need petrol to go to the shops, and the shops need petrol to get the goods from everywhere else. So these are things that I think a good government is going to have to now say, well, what kind of price controls? Maybe we have to subsidize that petrol price at a lower level, because if it just is reacting to a market that's created by Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, there's just no justice there.
What mechanisms are currently in place to buffer us from that?
Well, luckily we can manage. This is not a free market in petrol. It's one of those administered prices, like our electricity prices regulated. So I think we can say, well, this is an emergency. Hopefully it won't last too long. And maybe we need to take it from some tax revenue to subsidize the petrol price. But I think the biggest question is whether we're going to be seeing a broader economic depression. And then the other, the terrible silver lining, but below us, Blaine, was about half the world's historic gold. And we still have quite a lot, and the gold prices has shot up from around $250, if you remember, 25 years ago. Now it's 5,200, 300, hit 5,400. It's going to keep going up. So that's the crazy character of the barbarous relic, as it was often called.
So these are real-world consequences, practical consequences of this conflict on South Africans. Interest rates, petrol price. We're talking about the Strait of Hormuz. About 20 million barrels of oil passes through that daily. It's a choke point, vital choke point, and now that's disrupted, right? There's a possibility of some traffic coming around the Cape of Good Hope. I wonder, we'll talk about if there's a silver lining in terms of that being seen as a vital maritime source. But Sophie, are South Africans getting it? Are South Africans understanding the consequences of this conflict versus what the government is putting out saying, we got your back?
South Africans are quite inquisitive in terms of information, and not only on domestic issues, but also on international issues. You see how they respond. Yes, for them, the priority are domestic issues, as you saw with those messages that please focus on domestic issues, because we have pressing challenges such as unemployment, crime, and all that. But they are fully aware in terms of the implication as it relates to this conflict in the Middle East. They are fully aware that, as the Prof has indicated, when you look at the oil price going up, petrol will be expensive, and that will affect the lifeblood of commerce, that is transport. Secondly, the supply chain is going to be affected, as it did happen when the Gaza war intensified, where you have to choose certain routes that are much longer and much expensive for vessels to transport goods, including services. The same happened with the war in Ukraine, where we had problems of fertilizers and grain and all of that. And this one also, with the Gulf region being affected, we are going to be affected. They are fully aware. But I think for South Africans, because of the huge challenges we face in the country, unemployment, poverty, issues of housing, security in particular, they will always gravitate towards pushing that the government must focus on internal matters. But the truth of the matter is, South Africa is not an island. You can see we have our colleagues there outside. These are not only South Africans who are abroad. We have many South Africans in different parts of the world. And with the aviation sector choked, you can imagine even people, because Dubai and Doha are your main area in terms of connecting flight. It's cheaper routes. Whether you go South America, you're going to America, you're going to Europe, you're going to Eastern Europe, you're going to Asia. Dubai and Doha are the best area where you can connect and reduce price of traveling. And therefore, they know that, South Africans are very, very informed, but they have pressing issues.
Let's go to a video speech. I mean, when you hear all this, from what you're hearing on social media, what you just heard now, I wonder how you and your peers are processing all this information. What's the headlines versus the reality on the ground in your perspective?
Yes, I'm so glad, Sophie brought that perspective of the economical implications of what this is going to have in our country, but just not in South Africa, but in the entire African continent, but obviously from a channel perspective through South Africa. What I didn't want was to have earlier, I wanted to make some valid points. Please govern this interview so that I don't get to, argue with a fellow panel people who don't get the reality on the ground. I was in Dubai. I left and I evacuated in Dubai. And that's why I said, let us bring Clayson back here from a diplomacy point of view. There are so many issues. We have written to the embassy. The embassy in South Africa, the South African embassy in the UAE, doesn't have an evacuation plan. And that is a point of concern. I mean, right now, we definitely are not in a position to say, well, this could have been done and that could have been done. But my question is, what can we do right now? If we are going to be chatted, and we could have had, by the way, there's so many things we could have done, right? Deploy emergency consular teams, for an example, right? Countries often have rapid response teams to assist their nationals who are registered with the consulate, in the different countries. We don't have that. South Africa could have sent their teams to the airports, embassies, cross-border crossings. Clayson earlier mentioned Oman, and I wanted to check with him. Does he know that in the last 24 hours, by the way, we had an interception, we had a drone that was dropped at the Dubai airport? People are trapped right there, right now, right? So this raises an opportunity for discussion in terms of our diplomacy internationally, in terms of international relations, right? In terms of opportunities, what we could have done. There are so many things we could have done. The African Union, for an example, South Africa could have worked through the African Union, through BRICS. This could have allowed shared evacuation flights, joint diplomacy corridors, regional emergency operations. There are so many opportunities that could have been exhausted from this. But what we're not going to do is to act as if this is just another story. For example, countries like the US, France, Australia already maintain a evacuation proposal, right? So this is an opportunity for our country to learn that if we've got expatriates that have been accounted for in other countries, definitely there's an opportunity there. South Africa could likely, strengthen a crisis diplomacy. We need to work around our crisis diplomacy to ensure that the South Africans who are there right now, we're talking about real time, by the way. We're not talking about a story that has passed. Was saying our government, through DECO and other diplomacy ventures, they could look at an opportunity of how to rescue South Africans who want to come back home, because we're seeing an escalation in the region.
Look, no doubt we'll try to get Clayson back on, and it's an ongoing conversation because of the fluid situation. But I wonder, Sophie, if there's lessons here to be learned that South Africa can do things better.
Well, there's always opportunity or prospect of learning in one's life. Learning, it's a process, and countries have to deal with issues in a particular way at a particular time. You always learn. You would recall the evacuation from China during the start of the COVID. It was something new, but there were lessons learned. When you speak to a person like the Premier of Limpopo, Popi Ramathuba, who was responsible for health at that time, because these people were taken to Limpopo, she can tell you lessons learned. And I think in this case also, there are lessons to be learned in terms of perhaps strengthening the operation and the communication at embassies and consul offices. Because, look, this is the first time it's about a war. and a region affected where you have many countries and you have many South Africans in the Middle East, many, because of the relationship and the opportunities in the Middle East. And therefore, there are lessons to learn. And I just want to explain that what surprised me with this conflict is that I was speaking to someone who is involved in mediation in Israel, who was part of the mediation for the release of hostages. Because as a journalist, you speak to everybody for balance. On the 7th of January, I sent a message to say, it looks like you are going to attack Iran. He said, no. The concern is of miscalculation. The Iranian regime will think that Israel wants to take advantage of the internal unrest and they launch an attack on us, so the Iranians will launch preemptive strike. But it didn't happen that way. And therefore you can see that if this person who's so close to the Israeli administration had this information very clear that there's not going to be an attack, it means many countries were caught off guard.
Right. President Ramaphosa, Professor Bond, spoke about in a statement the Article 51 of the United Nations Charter in terms of the rules of engagement. South Africa's role in this conflict, we are close, we have ties with the global south, we also have ties with the Western economies. We are part of a group now known as the Hague Group. About 40 states met this week at The Hague talking about the enforcement of international law. How does that set us up in terms of playing a mediatory role in this conflict?
Well, it could be decisive. Let's say that we've talked through the financial capital implications, adverse. We probably should talk about the military. Luckily, our army isn't strong enough to be a factor. I mean, thank goodness we're not in Mozambique and DRC and Sudan and Central African Republic, because they didn't perform well. Now they're back here in South Africa. That's good. So the military capital has been weak, but diplomacy has been strong, because if you think of standing up for the rights of Palestinians, opposing a genocide, South Africa looks great. The problem is the hypocrisy, and the Hague Group is about the accountability to international law. And yet we have the sole supply of coal that goes into the Israeli electricity grid from Glencore and African Rainbow Minerals. And even 4 ships the last 2 months, 170,000 tons and up, go from Richards Bay, and that fuels the genocide. And so there's lots of protests regularly against those 2 big companies and against the government for being hypocritical, talking left, bad genocide, walking right, make the money out of it. And the same we could say for the Denel and its basically output of ammunition that goes up to Rheinmetall in Germany. Now, there is one way to go forward, which is called the Uniting for Peace. It's when you get a stagnation at the UN, which happens regularly. In 1956, the Suez Canal, the British and French and Israel on one side, the US and everyone else on the other, and they said, no, even if you're in the Security Council and you can veto, we can go around that in the UN, the Uniting for Peace. I hope South Africa goes that way. Colombia, the co-leader of the Hague Group, I hope will move in that direction. Spain might join. That Spain is the only really sane European power that's not in the axis of genocide. And so we might see an opening in the period ahead for the diplomacy to really ramp up and be even more effective. I think going to the courts has been good, but you very slowly get, we could get even more, more rapid injunctions from the courts, but we just haven't seen yet a big push from other countries, and we need that.
Before we wrap up, Yatin, I saw you had your hand up. Let's get your thoughts.
So, I'm reading comments as we go that South Africans are saying we should mind our own business. So, Professor Bond, on that score, and given that I run a supply chain consultancy between the GCC and South Africa, the way in which a possible way to offset this possible $100 a barrel oil that could come if this runs on for another couple of weeks, that's going to hurt the poorest South Africans first in terms of transportation and, of course, food costs. One very important offset, and Blaine, you touched on it, is that what used to be a secondary alternate route, the Cape route, the Cape route is now become the primary artery for global trade. And I'm working with my associate companies here, and we're looking at ways in which we can turn this into an opportunity for South Africa.
Right.
Because these vessels are going to need a staging post there for refueling and repairs and staff changes. Here's where the problem is, though. I love my country, but our ports are congested, our rail is inefficient, and I just hope we don't end up saying this is just another opportunity that went by, and when the world goes back to normal, we missed this one. I don't know if Prof. Bond, what's your comment on that?
Prof, let's get your final
very
thoughts.
quickly. It's just that we've seen that opportunity from the Houthis in Yemen stopping the next big body of water, the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, and that meant 12% of world trade was disrupted. Now that is probably going to be a factor again. I don't think our ports rose to the occasion. I don't think they improved. And I know we've had a privatization mess in Durban with an Indonesian company. We've had a lot of problems in actually doing maybe what you say, taking advantage of the opportunity. But maybe we shouldn't. Maybe in that sense, those ships can go around, take an extra 10 or 14 days without stopping in. I don't know if we need that sort of investment. It would be much more the investment in our own society and connecting our ambitious global peace agenda. The failure of the BRICS, the split right in half of the BRICS, means we invested in that, and I think inappropriately. We have, I think, without any disrespect to where you dear friends are, but we have problems with UAE, we have problems with Saudi. These are not good allies to have. They're too connected to what is, I think we'll end up saying, you know, as J.D. Vance, the Vice President, said, America's Hitler. Donald Trump and what he's doing and what they may do if they take it even further. We'll look back on historically and say, which side were we on? And can we actually amp up our diplomatic strategy now?
Not to be unfair to you, Sophie, you just have 30 seconds, but it's going to be a tough one to wrap up in 30 seconds. Donald Trump thinks that he can end this conflict within 5 weeks. Others are saying as long as it takes. Do you see this wrapping up in the next 5 weeks?
Not at all. I indicated I've been talking to the Iranians. They are bracing themselves for 6 months. They are on the ground, but we don't know. And in terms of South Africa's role in diplomacy, yes, South Africa is a friend to all the Gulf region countries. It can mediate. They can talk to the Iranians. The problem you have, the frosty relations with the United States of America and Israel. That would be the problem. You won't be able to speak to the main players, people who attacked first, who violated the United Nations Charter.
Sophie Mokoena, Professor Patrick Bond, thank you so much indeed. Yusuf, Yatin, as well as Spitch, appreciate your impact on the program. Wish you the best of luck. Thank you so much indeed. All right, before we go, here's my take. And a couple of questions, a couple of key questions for me anyway. To what extent has the art of the deal turned into the art of war? And what are the consequences if the world heads in that direction? Constructively advancing the peace agenda. It'll take, no doubt, a collective effort from the international community. If the rule of international law is eroded or disavowed, what are the consequences? Real world consequences. These are the questions that we need to ask ourselves, not only in the context of this current conflict, but in the context of humanity and in the furtherance of ensuring that we have a decent life during our limited time on this earth. Because this world is becoming so much smaller, it feels so much smaller due to the rapid advancements in technology. Time, space, compression, I think is what the smart people call it. We've become so connected. All the more reason to give peace a chance. So, big question on your screen. Can the door to diplomacy be reopened? Time will tell, something that we might not have much of. And that's my take. If you miss anything on this program, then be sure to watch this episode of It's Topical on YouTube as well as SABC+. If you're watching a repeat of this program, then as always, the news continues. Unwrap Africa up next with Tembekile. Until next week, my brothers and sisters, take care. Bye-bye.